It's just a few minutes after 12 p.m. Central Time, which means it's my privilege to welcome you to today's Alumni Career Webinar, Starting a Business, Why You Shouldn't Do It on the Side. My name is Dan Gould, and I'm the Senior Associate Director of Alumni Relations for Alumni Career and Affinity Programs here at the University of Chicago. My office is committed to helping provide alumni with the resources they need to stay competitive in an ever-changing job market and support the alumni community through career resources, networking channels, and job search capabilities. It's my privilege to introduce you to our presenter today, UChicago alumna Krisztina Kohlhaas. Krisztina is an expert in creating wealth and transforming lives. She partners with entrepreneurs, executives, and CEOs around the world and helps them up-level their businesses, exponentially boost their revenue, and become dynamic and collaborative leaders, communicators, and role models of high integrity. Kristina's clients have a bias for action and a willingness to face their fears in pursuit of their dreams. An adventurer herself, Krisztina has lived in 9 countries on 4 continents and has traveled to over 60. On 4 continents. She holds an MBA from our own University of Chicago Booth School of Business, an MA from George Washington University Elliott School of International Affairs, a BA from the University of California, San Diego, and is past president of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the International Coach Federation. Krisztina works by invitation only with a handful of highly engaged clients at a time, and by night she's also the lead singer in the classic rock cover band Soul Survivor. In today's webinar, part 1 of 3, Krisztina will explain why launching your own business can be one of the most rewarding and challenging endeavors you will ever undertake, and the myriad reasons that you should approach it with a fully committed mindset. Now let's get to the reason you've all joined today, and let me welcome Krisztina Kohlhaas to our presentation.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Okay, great. So I'm very excited to get started today. Let me just turn things on here. So there we go. All right. Well, I'm super excited to be here and talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, which is starting a business, and a little bit of an edgy angle to it in terms of why you shouldn't do it on the side. So I'm looking forward to exploring that with everybody today. So let's just dive right in. Let me start by going over our intentions for today. My first intention for today is for us to have fun. This is a really fun and exciting topic. Entrepreneurship is a lot of fun. It's challenging. It's wonderful. So let's have a good time with it. I want to give you a little bit of background about me, who I am, what I do, why I care about this, why I'm here, etc., etc. And then I want to tell you about the #1 thing to consider when you are thinking about starting a business. So we'll go into that. Then we'll get to our golden nugget of today, why you shouldn't do it on the side. Or, in other words, under which circumstances you should do it under the side, and when it makes sense to really dive right in. Then after that, I'll walk through some strategies for success and give you all some additional resources for continued learning. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So a little background. So this is me. I have a coaching business that I've been running for 3.5 years, working with leaders and entrepreneurs. I also sing in a rock band called Soul Survivor, which you can see in the top photo there. And I'm an avid world traveler. And through my work, I've been able to weave all of these things into my business, which makes it even more fulfilling and wonderful for me. So we'll be talking more about that. But, you know, one of the things that I'm very passionate about as it relates to business is crafting it around your lifestyle. You know, there's a lot of we make a lot of sacrifices sometimes when we start a business, and that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. And so I'm very big on bringing our passions into our business from the get-go and setting really clear boundaries how we incorporate our work-life balance. So we'll be talking more about that too. Just a little bit about my business. I offer bespoke or custom private coaching programs to just a handful of people. I run a group program a couple times a year called the Rockstar Leadership Circle. And I also offer international retreats for leaders and business owners where we dive really deep into topics around business and leverage our environment and the other cultures that we're in to gain a different perspective on what we're doing. So that's a little bit about me and what I do. So let's dive into the topic of entrepreneurship and building a business. So when people talk about building a business or leaving a job to go build a business, there are a variety of things to consider. Clearly, it's a big commitment if that's something that you're thinking about doing. So the first thing to consider is what in your life are you willing to change? You know, building a business has a really big impact on your time and how you spend it, as well as your money and how you earn it, as well as how you spend it. So there's going to be some big changes that come along with deciding to start a business. And so it's good to think through those things and consider, you know, what am I really ready for? When is the right time to start a business? Well, the truth is that there's really no perfect time to start a business. It's sort of like having a baby, you know, the baby's coming, and when it's there, it's there. And it's kind of like that, you know, in terms of our personal role in starting a business. Now, of course, there's external variables that would lead us to choose a certain business at a certain time. For example, market demand, changes in the economy, all kinds of things that may have us look at a situation and, wow, this is a really great opportunity. But on a personal level, then, you know, you get to make the choice of whether you want to dive right in and take that opportunity. And so it's never going to be perfect. It's always going to come with a little bit of a ripple or something like that. So that's just something to keep in mind. So what are some of the success indicators for starting a business? Well, there was a report put out by Ernst & Young in 2011 that really went deep and looked at some of the key success indicators for entrepreneurs. And some of them are here: risk tolerance, independence, persuasiveness, ability to negotiate, creative, and supported. The truth is, you know, we have this myth that some people are just born entrepreneurs, that they have some sort of gene inherent in them, and therefore they're more likely to succeed than not. Well, that's actually not true. And in fact, according to this Ernst & Young study, one of the things that came out was, in fact, it's experience and how you learn and apply experience that actually make you successful as an entrepreneur. And in fact, in this study, the number one thing people said was that that helped them as an entrepreneur was experience as an employee. So having any sort of work experience and being on the inside of a company and seeing the mechanics of how it works and the people and the politics and this and that made them actually more successful as entrepreneurs. So also as part of this study, this is straight out of the study, there's this breakdown of what is sort of the personality type that people develop as they step into entrepreneurship. The main feature of this is this internal locus of control. So what does that mean? Basically, what that means is that entrepreneurs really get at their core that they're in charge of the outcomes in their life, that a certain action will lead to a certain result, and that it's all about the action that they want to take, and how that how they then achieve their own outcomes. So everybody might say, oh, well, I want to be in control of my life and my outcomes. But entrepreneurial leaders typically have the drive and fortitude to act on that urge for control as well as independence. And what's more, they do it consistently and with a sense of urgency over a sustained period of time. So there's kind of like a just do it attitude to the entrepreneur's personality. And they really believe that they are leading their life instead of their life being leading them. So this is what I sometimes think of as the owner-victim distinction. Are you really in an ownership position in your life, or are you in a place where you feel like things are happening to you as opposed to you creating your own outcomes? So that's what Ernst & Young had to say. Here's what I have to say. These, to me, are things that I've seen have been very powerful and for people that I've noticed succeed as entrepreneurs. And the first is, are they impeccable with their word? Meaning, do you really understand the power of creating your reality through what you say you'll do, through follow-through, through a high level of integrity, and how do you use that power of your word to create your reality? Then you believe in yourself, and are you willing to drown out the chatter of everybody else? You know, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters, the only person that matters is if you believe in yourself, because there are going to be naysayers everywhere. For every business idea that one person believes in, there's going to be somebody who doesn't believe in it, and that's just true. So at the end of the day, you have to decide which voice you're going to listen to. Do you go with your inner knowing that says, I can do this, or are you going to let the outside world influence your direction? And so the people I've seen be really successful are the ones who are able and willing to drown out that chatter. The next is, are you willing to walk through the fire and do things that scare you? There's a lot in entrepreneurship around uncharted territory and leaning into your edge, and in many cases, well, in all cases, sales, and that's often an uncomfortable area for people who haven't done it before. So are you willing to do those things and to really walk through the fire because the goal on the other side is worth it for you? That's something to look at. And as part of that, that includes taking perfect action, because nothing is ever really perfect. And so it's also about starting things before you feel completely ready. And that's also why a lot of people tend to stay working on their business, quote unquote, on the side, because they want to feel like it's perfect. They want to feel like they're ready, and then they'll actually jump in. But it's actually from the jumping in that the readiness comes. And it's from the taking action that confidence builds, and not the other way around. And finally, are you committed? You know, commitment is you're either committed or you're not. You're either in or you're out. It's like you're pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. You know, it's black and white. There's no in between. And, you know, we hear a lot in our society about, like, oh, I'll try to commit, or I'm halfway committed. Well, if you're halfway committed, then you're not committed. And really, when it comes to building a business, you want to be all in. You want to be that committed person. And a lot of times that's what it takes to be successful at it. So there's a great example from Angela Lee Duckworth, who did an excellent TED Talk on this about success indicators just in general. This isn't even related to entrepreneurship, but she basically said that grit, which is passion and plus perseverance, is what makes a lot of people successful. So if you find that thing that you're passionate for and you're willing to persevere, then you'll get to, then that's the best indicator of your outcome. The example of the movie Rudy is a great example of this being applied in a non-entrepreneurial setting, but, you know, really, and I don't, you know, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's about a college football player who for years worked on having effectively what became in the limelight at Notre Dame, and then experienced this big celebration and success, but it took a long time, but he stuck with it because he had the passion and the perseverance, and it's a great example of what I'm talking about with this. So here's the #1 question to ask yourself when you're thinking about starting a business. And, you know, we've talked about all of the other things up until now, but this pretty much sums it up. And that question is why? Why do you want to do this? Are you doing it for the money? Are you doing it because you love this thing that you're creating? Are you doing it because of some other outcome, like you want to achieve financial freedom or time freedom? You know, those are all reasons to consider, but the truth is that it really is in your passion where success is going to emanate from. Money, in the words of P. Diddy, don't chase the paper, chase the dream. A lot of businesses will help you make money if you commit, if you're all in, but at the end of the day, why work on something just for the money? Because that's not going to carry you through when you hit those stumbling blocks, when you run into roadblocks and the going gets tough. It's going to be your passion for that thing that you're creating, whatever it is, that's really going to carry you through those tough times. So that's why it's a great question to ask yourself, why am I doing this? And that's also going to be relevant as you then go out and market yourself and start to build your business. Simon Sinek, who I also very much recommend watching his TED Talk, Start With Why, says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that's how a lot of companies differentiate themselves too, very successful ones in the marketplace. For example, so Sinek has what he calls the golden circle, and at the center of it is the why, and it's the deepest and most important part of this circle because it's also where a lot of the emotional connection lies. People make purchasing decisions, interactions, everything largely from an emotional and not a rational place. And a great example of this that he gives is Apple Computer. So Apple, through the years, has always been a representation of something that goes against the mainstream or the status quo, which is ironic because now Apple is so mainstream. But the whole mission behind it was to disrupt the way people were always doing computing. And personal computers and all of that, and by bringing in nice font, a nice aesthetic, by making the entire thing very an aesthetic and not just a functional experience. And so that's pretty much summed up in their mission statement. which is everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. And the way we challenge the status quo is by making our product beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. And sorry, let me get now into the mission statement. That's basically what they're saying with their mission statement, and what the actual mission statement is Apple designs Macs, the best personal computers in the world, along with the OXS, iLife, iWork, and professional software. Apple leads the digital music revolution with its iPods and iTunes online store, and has reinvented the mobile phone with its revolutionary iPhone and App Store, and is defining the future of mobile media and computing devices with iPad. So there's a lot of language in there about disruption, revolution, et cetera, and basically what they're saying is if you want to be different, if you want to be unique, then buy a product. So Apple basically lives there. And if you look by comparison, and just picked a random other computer companies, no specific reason, but Lenovo's vision is to build the world's most exceptionally engineered personal technology products and services. So it's all about function, and there's very little emotional component there. Lenovo is also a great company and a great product, but you buy it for very different reasons. So basically, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that's not only important when you consider why you want to start a business, but it's also going to be important when you then go out to market your business. Another question to think about when starting a business is, if you didn't pursue it, how would it feel? You know, a lot of times we like to ask the question, if you're looking back on your life, what would you regret? Or what wouldn't you regret? And if you think you're going to end up like this guy, the grumpy old man from Saturday Night Live, then you may want to think about what you want to do as it relates to starting your business. All right, so business, and why you shouldn't do it on the side. So let me just say a couple statistics about businesses. So there are 28 million small businesses in the United States, which outnumber corporations by almost 1,200 to 1. Now, 70% of these are owned by a single person, which is almost 20 million small businesses. That means 20 million, basically that means there are 20 million sole proprietors in the United States, which is roughly 11% of the working population. So that's a lot. Statistically, a lot of you on this webinar, should you choose to start a business, may end up in this category, which could be anything from independent consultants to a multi-level marketer to a coach like me, accountants, lawyers, lots of people who work for themselves. And a lot of those are home-based too, over half. And a sobering statistic is that 80% of businesses fail within the first 18 months. Now, that's unfortunate, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I'll touch on those too. But one of them, in my opinion, is commitment. And so I like to think of it as a really simple formula. If you want a side income, then have a side business. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, if you want to add $20,000 or $50,000 to your income, then that's awesome. And you can do that with a side business. But if you ultimately want to make a good income and a good living off of your business and have that be your primary vehicle, then I would suggest to be all in. And here's a great example about that. So This is The Truth About Six-Pack Abs. Now, this is an online, basically, ebook that you can buy, and it was started by a guy named Mike Geary. And basically, he was running this venture on the side, and it took him about 2 years to get up to $50,000 a year, at which point he decided to quit his job. Now, this is, I would say, in my experience, the exception, not the rule, where people get to a point where they can then say, okay, I'm at 50 grand and I now jump in and do this all in. Most people, from what I've seen, when they're trying to balance something, a full-time job and a business on the side, rarely get to that point. So I just want to point that out too. But even in his case, once he quit and was all in, his earnings increased 10 times. And then the following year went to 3.6 million, 6 million, and then finally 11 million in annual revenue, which are staggering numbers, and just shows the power of really diving in fully and investing all of your energy to go from 50,000 one year to 500,000 the next is a big jump. So I can also tell stories like that from my own clients. I had one client who was working on 3 different businesses and at one time. And the second she decided to narrow her focus and just focus on one business and let the other 2 go, her revenue jumped up by like 3 times in a quarter. So there are lots of stories as far as why to be all in on a business. I do want to just go back quickly and touch on the statistic of 80% of businesses failing within the first 18 months, and say something about that. Now we're talking about commitment and being all in, and that's really important when it comes to starting a business. With that being said, there's a whole variety of reasons why that might be the case, that a business would fail. Not understanding customers, not understanding the market, not communicating a value proposition, or even really knowing how to communicate at all about a business. There could be a whole bunch of reasons for that. So I just wanted to say that it's not exclusively related to whether you're in or out, or halfway in or halfway out. There could be a variety of other reasons. Dan, did you have a question?
I did, actually, and it relates back to something we were touching on a little bit earlier. And Krisztina, I think that this might be helpful for the finance people, but I'm wondering, when you talked previously about the success indicators for someone in this position, is this really for an entrepreneurial mindset, or from your standpoint, is this universal? And
these success indicators here, the ones on, are the ones that I was talking about. These here.
Your specific ones, and specifically, if they're not universal, how might they differ from then a traditional 9-to-5 corporate job?
I think that's a great question, and I would actually say that that they are universal. I would say that these things in particular will serve anybody in any particular environment. Certainly there are aspects that show up more when you are talking about entrepreneurship. For example, this thing about walking through the fire and doing things that scare you, certainly that comes up in a corporate setting, absolutely. I mean, you might be asked to give a presentation in front of a bunch of people, or do a report and for somebody high up on the ladder. I don't know. There are a variety of examples where that would apply. And when you then venture out on your own as an entrepreneur, those things just keep popping up constantly, Because a lot of us, when we're in the steady place of a secure job, we're doing things we know how to do. We do things like our reports or whatever they are. We're producing a function. But when you go out as a business owner, there's a whole other added layer into that, which is the sales component. And so that's where I think that stuff shows up even more. But I think you're absolutely right that these are, in fact, universal traits that would support anybody in creating whatever they want. I mean, I sing in a band, and believe me, I'm going to push these buttons in that respect all the time.
Thanks. That's a great example.
Yeah. Thanks. That's a great example. Yeah. Okay. Great. So let's just go back to where we were here. Okay. So great. All right. So with that being said, I just wanted to go over the different types of businesses that are out there. When we think of business, we often think of a startup, especially for me coming out of Booth. That's probably one of the first things I think of is a startup that actually goes out and gets funding to build a company. But there are actually a lot of different ways to be an entrepreneur, and as we learned, a large subset of that is small business and sole proprietorship. So we've got that here on the list. We've got nonprofit. That's a great way to be an entrepreneur if you have a social cause that you're passionate about. You can buy a business, which is also a great way to go. And you can do a franchise. Now, franchises come in all shapes, sizes, colors. When we think of franchise, we usually think of something like McDonald's or Subway or something like that, but they can be all kinds of things. I mean, there's dog care franchises, there's vending machines. And a vending machine, by the way, might be a really great business to have on the side, because a vending machine you can earn about $25,000 a year, and it's pretty low maintenance and something that you can do relatively easily. And then there's multi-level marketing, and I wanted to put that on here intentionally because it isn't yet another form of business. But I also wanted to comment that this is a type of business that often gets a bad rap. We call them pyramid schemes or whatever it is, but that's actually very far from the truth. Network marketing, as it's also known, relationship marketing, multi-level marketing are totally legitimate businesses, and these are actually, I would say, of all of them, to generalize, probably the best one if you wanted to do something quote-unquote on the side, because they're designed to fit into already active and busy lifestyles. That's why you see lots of moms and stay-at-home moms doing things like multi-level marketing, because it's designed to fit around family. But for a lot of these others, certainly a startup, we all hear stories about startup culture and how busy and active people are and how the long hours that they work and all of that. So, there's various gradations of your time and energy investment when you look at exactly what type of business to build. Other things to think about as you're venturing out is, what is my product or service? And really, what problem am I solving? And what's causing my clients or customers pain? This sort of touches on the point I made earlier about why a lot of businesses fail, is they don't get these aspects dialed in. They're not clear on what their value proposition is or the ultimate result that they offer people. They may not differentiate themselves or simply just not understand their customers. One of the things I often have clients do is just go out and interview 15 people in your target market and ask them, what are you struggling with? What do you need? What do you want? Et cetera, which is also not only great information, but then also a fantastic marketing tool, because you can then use their exact words, and instead of coming up with, industry jargon, you can use their language when you then make your own promotional materials, and people relate to that a lot better. So these are also some things to think about when you're just starting out building a business. All right, so let's look at some strategies for success. So this ties into the point I just made, but it just bears repeating so much, is know your ideal client and customer. This is perhaps the most important thing to figure out first. One of the things that I see a lot of people do, I work in particular with people in professional services who are providing a service as opposed to a good, and one of the things that I see a lot is people trying to be all things to all people. Well, that, especially in the beginning, they want to keep their options open, but actually that doesn't serve anybody over the long run, because when you're trying to sell something to somebody who's just not your target market, it either doesn't turn out well, or it just is a waste of time and energy. And so I really encourage people early on to get super clear on who they want to be working with, who they want to be selling to. And not only that, then for you as a business owner, you're basically engaged only with your hell yeah people who you love working with. But it also helps shape all of your future marketing and communication. It makes your referral and word of mouth process vastly easier, because people know who to send you. They know who you work with, and they know the type of people that you love to be around. So that's one thing. The next thing is learn how to communicate about your business. Know your numbers. You see those people go on Shark Tank, for example, and get in front of the investors. It's all about numbers, numbers, numbers. And the people well on that show are the people who know their numbers inside and out. They also know their value proposition inside and out, and they know exactly where they fit in the market. There we hear a lot about elevator pitches. An elevator pitch is a great thing to have. I personally like to tell stories. I like to tell success stories about my clients. I have great stories that I accumulate over time that demonstrate how I help people. For example, I had a client who was a franchise owner come to me, and he hadn't had a sale in his business for several months, something like 7 or 8 months. And we started working together. He got super focused, really committed, reinvested in his business, and in less than 2 months, he initiated and closed a $1.5 million. So those are the type of stories I like to tell, because they really demonstrate how I help people and what I help people do. I personally don't even have a canned elevator pitch. I just really enjoy telling stories. And be ready to speak about your business at any time. Once you become a business owner, that's your life. That's who you are, and it's going to become a big part of your identity. And the people around you are going to be fascinated by it. There's a lot of people who are intrigued by people who are business owners and really curious about how it all works and what they do, and they want to support you. So definitely encourage, and that's why it's also important to be passionate about your business too, because if you don't like what you're doing, you're not going to want to talk about it all the time. So these were just some of the basic broad brush over things. And then the next piece is getting comfortable with sales. You know, we go into business, we choose our business from our passion, from our why, but at the end of the day, we do have to make money. Otherwise, we're not in business anymore. I mean, that's one of the main reasons businesses fail too, is they run out of cash or they're simply not making enough money. And you know, tend to have a stigma against sales in our society, but really entrepreneurship can't exist without it. And we're always selling. I mean, you go on a date with somebody that you really like, I can promise you you're selling, and I'm sure we've all had that experience at one point. So I just like to offer different perspectives on sales. You know, usually, or not usually, but sometimes when we think of sales, we think about the guy on the left. Selling is manipulating, or it's hard, or et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is, people love to be sold to because everybody has problems that they want to solve. And so I really like to encourage people to think about sales from the perspective on the right, which really, sales is how you serve people. It's how you give your gift to the world and how you make people's lives better. And whatever product or service is not going to be for everybody. So sales is also about getting comfortable with the word no, but it is going to be for your people. And all you really need to do as a business owner is go find those people. That's it. And for you personally, you know, selling is the vehicle through which you live your dream, whatever that is. You know, your financial freedom, your income, your lifestyle, that's how you get there. So, and I just want to say we're going to be diving a lot deeper into these ideas around communication, sales, all of that when we talk through our webinar next month on success strategies for being a professional services entrepreneur. So just a little foreshadowing for that. So here's kind of the broad brush success tips for entrepreneurship. First is have a powerful team. And even if you're a sole proprietor, then have the people around you that can help you. You know, if you're a visionary and not a detail-oriented, have a bookkeeper. If you are in a startup or launching a bigger business, then make sure those people are powerful. And I'm not just saying this because I am one, but I do firmly believe have a mentor or a coach. Coaching can make a world of difference, an exponential world of difference in terms of someone's progress and focus and just their ability to follow through and think through things. It's incredibly powerful. Surround yourself with people who support you and your vision. This is also key. It helps to drown out the chatter of the naysayers. Constantly be networking. Visualize your success. I'm big on visualization and knowing the general direction of where you are going and focusing on that on a daily basis. Create the space in your life for your business. Celebrate victories. This one is so often overlooked. We tend to beat ourselves up when we have a failure, and that can be a really dangerous place to go for a lot of entrepreneurs. It can suck you down into this abyss of low self-esteem and lack of confidence. So we mitigate that by celebrating success. And every time you get a new client or customer, anytime your sales increase, anytime you get invited to do something new, celebrate that. It's very important. And finally, take imperfect action and just start. Or in Richard Branson's words, screw it, let's do it. Here's Steve Jobs on success. I'm convinced that half of what separates the successful entrepreneurs from the non-successful ones is pure perseverance. And that could very well be true. You know, that's half of the grit equation. All right, so I just want to offer everybody some resources for continued learning. here are a couple of the TED Talks that I mentioned, as well as just Steve Jobs as well. Just for sheer inspiration, I personally like to look to successful business owners, entrepreneurs. I get a lot of inspiration and motivation from hearing from them and reading their biographies, listening to what they have to say. So I definitely encourage people to do that. And then here are some books that I have found to be really powerful when it comes to entrepreneurship. The $100 Startup, about people who started businesses using $100 or less. Start with Why, which we already touched on. It sort of models the TED Talk. Leaving Mike to Change the World is a great book about John Wood, who left Microsoft and started Room to Read, one of the most successful nonprofits around. They build libraries and provide education for children in developing countries. The classic Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. The Entrepreneur Equation, which gives you the tools to evaluate the realities, risks, and rewards of having your own business. The Diamond Cutter, which is a great book on incorporating practices such as slowing down, meditation, taking breaks, and Buddhist principles. And the guy who wrote it applied all of those, was a former Buddhist monk, and applied all of those principles to his business and built a $100 million diamond business in New York. Daniel Pink, Human, and finally The Four Agreements, which is not necessarily a business book, but applies, I think, really powerfully to anybody in business in terms of personal growth. And just a couple more things. There's the Small Business Administration, BNI, Networking for Small Businesses, SCORE, which provides entrepreneurial mentorship, online resources such as entrepreneur.com and Forbes.com. And then there's regional and women's organizations such as the Entrepreneurship Center in the Bay Area. In Chicago, there's the Women's Business Development Center. You can go find these regional and local organizations wherever you are, and I recommend taking advantage of them because they all have often free services and really great support for people starting businesses. All right, and so finally, the last part is I am offering to everybody on this webinar, if you would like to talk more about this or learn more about any of this or talk specifically through your particular situation, we can block off time for a powerful coaching conversation. So if that's something you'd like to do, email me at Coach Chris. The email is right there. It's an application for a conversation. I'm starting another leadership circle in January 2015, and in May of next year, I'll be taking a group of entrepreneurs and leaders to Bali for a week-long retreat. So those are just some foreshadowing of things to come. But if you'd like to take advantage of the powerful coaching conversation, it doesn't have anything to do with any of those two, just reach out to me and we'll block off time to talk, and there's no fee or obligation for any of that. So with that, what questions are there?
And if anyone has a question, please feel free to send it in the chat box. In the interim, I'm going to jump in with a question of my own, Krisztina.
Sure.
So you covered a lot of ground in today's webinar, and for those of us who might still be working in an office job and wondering about our next step, you've made a great path for where we're going, but what's the one thing that I should do after I close my computer and step away from my desk today? What's the one thing I need to do to get started?
Well, do you have an idea? I mean, I think that's the first thing, is figuring out what exactly is you're going to do. But, I always I will say when we think about business, a lot of times we tend to get overwhelmed, and maybe this is the direction of your question. We tend to get overwhelmed and we think, oh, I need a website, I need business cards, I need this, I need that, I need da 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 da. And actually, none of that is necessary. The only thing anybody really needs to focus on as an initial step, providing you know what your business is. I mean, I would say that's step 0. But then step 1 is go out and get a client. Go out and get a customer. That's really all you need to do. I mean, I know people in professional services who have built six-figure businesses and beyond with no website. I know people in the startup world who have built and sold technology companies with no website because they were focused in on what they needed to do, which is get their product really airtight, their service really airtight, and go out and build their customer base.
That's great, and maybe related to that, in a lot of my conversations with alumni, we talk about the professional network that is available to you as graduates of the university, but we also talk about sometimes for a career transition about reconfiguring your network. So I know you pointed out a couple of different resources, but maybe in that step 0, where you're still trying to figure out exactly what your service is going to be, particularly if it's a professional service, who do you network with? Who am I looking for if I'm on the directory, if I'm going to an event? What does that profile of a person look like to find some colleagues?
Yeah, great question. Well, this is also an area where I think it's really good to get clear on who you love to work with. And by that I mean, what are the intrinsic characteristics of the people you want in your world? Whether they're customers, networking, connections, people on your team, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I would say we're lucky in that we went to the University of Chicago. We have a great network at our fingertips. I know for myself personally, when I was initially exploring the possibility of becoming a coach, I was looking actually at a couple different businesses. In fact, I almost became an event planner, which would have been a very different business. But part of what I did is I actually leveraged this network and went to the University of Chicago Community Directory, and I looked up every single person who was a coach and every single person who was an event planner, and I reached out to them, and I set up informational interviews so I could get a sense of the profession, what they did, how they set it up and ran their businesses. And for me, that was probably one of the most impactful things that I did, because through that process it just became very clear which the right choice was for me. So another great thing about it is it starts to build your network in that chosen profession. Regardless of which one you choose, once then you enter, I already had 8 or 10 people that I could call on regularly that I already knew that were doing the same thing I did, that could eventually be a referral partner or a collaborator. And so it's very powerful. Does that answer your question? I'm not
No, that was
sure
perfect.
Exactly what you asked, but okay, great.
I have one more question that I'll insert here, and it goes back to, I think, when you were talking about success indicators again. And you mentioned a couple times through the course of your presentation about risk tolerance. And the question is, so if you would go to a financial advisor, there's a very clear intake form to talk about risk tolerance, and find out if your assumptions about yourself are as true as you think they are. You mentioned a book. I'll point this out. You talked about the entrepreneur equation, but are there other resources or ways to look at what is your risk tolerance level in terms of opening up a business? Because it's different than I think a lot of us think of risk tolerance.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of those questions that that plays itself out in reality. I mean, basically, you either see if you're willing to take the plunge or not. I can't think of any resources off the top of my head, but I think it's really up to the person. You know, I get to choose, okay, am I going to leave my job and start this business? And if you do, then you probably have a higher risk tolerance. If you don't, then you probably don't. And risk tolerances, I will say, can shift over time. You're not static. You're not born with a risk tolerance. You're not the same way you're like different from, say, you're born with certain personality traits or physical characteristics. I can say for myself, my first career was in government. I worked for the federal government as an economist, and that was basically the antithesis of risk tolerant. I had a very secure government job. And built my risk tolerance over time through leaving to go to Booth and then being exposed to entrepreneurs and people doing things differently, and just my path of life wove in a certain way that I now consider myself very risk tolerant, but I had to build that over time. So I think really it ultimately comes down to this question of, again, what is your why? And is your why enough compel you to push through your fears and develop your risk tolerance, because that can happen too.
That's great, and I think that's a perfect way to wrap up the hour and end our presentation.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan.
Thank you, Krisztina. Thanks for joining us. And thank you to everyone else for joining us on today's presentation on starting your own business. As a reminder, just watch your email. There will be an invitation both to take a survey, and then please stay tuned for part 2 of this webinar series with Krisztina Kohlhaas. Part 2 will be about opening your own professional services business. Part 3 to be determined, and please stay tuned because we'll be looking into the realm of entrepreneurship from a venture capital standpoint. Thanks again for everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next Alumni Career Webinar on October 28th. In the meantime, check our website at careers.uchicagoalumni.org. Thanks for tuning in.